For 7 years, Park Ji-sung had never looked twice at anyone who crossed his path. Socialites threw themselves at him at exclusive galas. Celebrities begged for his attention at VIP lounges. Heiresses from rival families were offered as peace treaties. He dismissed them all with the same cold, empty stare. His syndicate had a name for him: the Viper King. Some whispered he had no heart. Others said it turned to stone the night he took over the underworld at 19. Everyone agreed on one thing: Park Ji-sung would never bow to anyone, and no one would ever make him feel. But on an ordinary Thursday night at the Skyline restaurant, everything shattered. The room fell into its usual ritual the moment his silhouette appeared in the doorway. Conversations died mid-sentence. Champagne glasses froze halfway to lips. Every head in that 70-story Sky Bar dropped in synchronized submission: patrons, managers, even the chef who'd been screaming orders in the kitchen moments before. This was his kingdom. This was his power. And everyone knew the price of defiance. Ji-sung moved through the dining hall like death in a tailored suit, his footsteps swallowed by the plush carpet, the geometric tattoo on his neck visible even in the dim amber lighting. He reached his usual table by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Seoul skyline, expecting the same terrified silence, the same invisible service. Then he felt it. Eyes on him. He turned his head slowly, dangerously, and there she was. Amy Storm, a shy black waitress with her hair pulled back in a neat bun, her hands gripping the edge of his table, her body leaning forward instead of bowing down. She was trembling. He could see it in the way her knuckles had gone pale, but her chin was up. Her gaze was locked on his. And in a room full of people who'd rather die than meet his eyes, she refused to look away. The silence stretched. Someone's fork clattered to the floor in the back of the room. His security moved forward, hands reaching for weapons, but Ji-sung raised one finger and they froze. He tilted his head, studying her. The tattoo on his neck stretched with the movement. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, lethal, and laced with curiosity. Everyone in this room is on the floor. But you're still standing. Tell me why, or I'll assume you're begging for a death sentence. Amy's lips parted. Her voice came out barely louder than a breath, but every word rang clear. I only bow to God. The room held its breath. Ji-sung's eyes narrowed, and for the first time in 7 years, something cracked inside the ice. He didn't kill her. He didn't even raise his voice. He just leaned back in his chair, pulled out a roll of cash thick enough to choke on, and tossed it onto the table. Then he stood, buttoned his suit jacket, and walked to the door. But before he disappeared into the night, he turned back one last time, his gaze finding hers across the frozen room. Be ready tomorrow, Miss Storm. You just made yourself very interesting. If you're loving this dark romance already, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our pulse-pounding Mafia love stories. Drop a comment and tell me, are you team she should run, or team she should stay? The silence that followed Amy's words felt like the moment before an execution. Ji-sung's guards moved as one, 3 men in black suits with violence written in their body language. The closest one, a man with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, reached for Amy's arm. His fingers were an inch from her wrist when Ji-sung's voice cut through the air like a blade. Stop. The guard froze. Everyone froze. Ji-sung hadn't raised his voice, hadn't even moved from his seated position, but the single word carried absolute authority. The kind of authority that came from years of making examples out of people who disobeyed. He stood slowly, deliberately, his movements controlled and predatory. The tailored black suit didn't hide the lean, dangerous build beneath it. He was tall, taller than Amy had realized, and as he approached, she could see the intricate details of the tattoo that crawled up his neck. Geometric patterns that looked like they told a story she couldn't read. A story written in blood and power. Ji-sung stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and dark, like leather and smoke. His eyes were black, empty pools that seemed to swallow light rather than reflect it. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, but somehow more terrifying. You only bow to God. He repeated her words slowly, tasting them. Interesting. Do you believe God is in this room right now, Miss Storm? She managed, her voice steadier than she felt. Amy Storm. Miss Storm. He let her name roll off his tongue like he was testing its weight. Do you know who I am? Yes. Then you know I could have you removed from this building in pieces so small they'd need dental records to identify you. Amy's hands were still gripping the table. She couldn't seem to let go. Yes, and yet you stand here, trembling like a leaf in a storm. Fitting name, by the way. And you refuse to bow. He leaned in slightly, and she caught the dangerous curiosity in his expression. Are you stupid, Miss Storm? Or are you the bravest person I've ever met? She wanted to look away. Every instinct screamed at her to drop her eyes, to apologize, to beg. But something deeper, something trained into her by a father she hadn't spoken to in 3 years, kept her gaze locked on his. In the military, they'd taught her that predators attacked when you showed weakness. She didn't know if the same rule applied to men like Park Ji-sung, but she was too terrified to test any other theory. I'm just a waitress, she whispered. I'm nobody. I can't bow. I won't. Something flickered across Ji-sung's face. Not anger, not even irritation. It looked almost like interest. The kind of interest a scientist might show when discovering a new species. He studied her for another long moment, then straightened and reached into his jacket. Every guard in the room tensed. Amy's heart hammered against her ribs. He pulled out a money clip, solid gold, she noticed distantly, and counted out bills with the casual ease of someone who'd never worried about money in his life. When he finished, he tossed the stack onto the table between them. Amy's eyes widened. It was more money than she made in 3 months. For your service tonight, Ji-sung said, his tone unreadable. Then he buttoned his suit jacket with precise movements and turned toward the door. His guards fell into formation around him immediately, a well-trained unit moving as one organism. But before he reached the exit, he paused, turned his head just enough that she could see his profile, the sharp line of his jaw, the way the tattoo disappeared beneath his collar. Be ready tomorrow, Miss Storm. His voice carried across the silent restaurant, meant for her ears and everyone else's. A public claim, a warning. Wear that same uniform, same shift, I'll be back for you. Then he was gone, and the restaurant exhaled as one. Amy's knees gave out the moment the door closed behind him. She caught herself on the table, her hands shaking so badly she could barely grip the edge. The money sat there, mocking her with its implications. Around her, the other staff members were slowly coming back to life, whispers spreading like wildfire. Is she insane? Did you see that? She looked him in the eye. She's dead, she just doesn't know it yet. Min-ji, the head waitress and the closest thing Amy had to a friend here, materialized at her side. The older Korean woman's face was pale, her hands fluttering nervously. Amy yaw, what were you thinking? Do you have any idea what you just did? Amy shook her head, her mouth felt dry, her tongue thick. I don't know, I couldn't. Min-ji, I couldn't just bow. I couldn't, you couldn't, or you wouldn't. Min-ji's voice dropped to an urgent whisper. That man owns half of Seoul. The other half just doesn't know it yet. People who displease him disappear, Amy. They disappear. I know. Amy's voice came out as barely a breath. I know who he is. Then why? How could she explain it? How could she tell Min-ji that in that moment, when everyone else was bowing, something in her military brat instincts had screamed danger? That she'd seen something in the window's reflection behind Ji-sung. Just a glint, just a flash, and her body had moved on pure survival instinct? That standing tall hadn't been defiance but protection, even if she didn't fully understand why. She couldn't, so instead she just said, I don't know. Min-ji studied her face for a long moment, then sighed and began helping her clean up. Take the money, hide it, and tomorrow. She paused, her expression grave. Tomorrow, you be very, very careful. Men like Park Ji-sung don't give second chances. Whatever he wants from you, it won't be simple. And it won't be safe. Amy looked at the stack of bills on the table, then at the window where Ji-sung had been sitting. The Seoul skyline glittered beyond the glass, beautiful and cold and unforgiving. I know, she whispered to her reflection. I know. The next evening, Amy arrived at the Skyline an hour early. She'd barely slept, her mind replaying the encounter on an endless loop, analyzing every word, every gesture, every dangerous second. She'd changed into her uniform 3 times, trying to get everything perfect, then hating herself for caring. The restaurant felt different tonight. Tense. Manager Kim had pulled her aside the moment she arrived, his round face slick with nervous sweat. Miss Storm, there's been a development, a private booking. The entire restaurant. One guest. Amy's stomach dropped. Park Ji-sung. Manager Kim flinched at the name. He requested you specifically. No one else is to serve him. No one else is even to be visible. He wrung his hands, and for the first time, Amy saw genuine fear in his eyes. Please, Miss Storm, whatever he wants, just give it to him. Don't make trouble. I have a family. The words should have angered her, but Amy understood. Survival in Seoul meant knowing when to bow and when to run. Manager Kim was doing both. By 7:30, the Skyline was empty except for the kitchen staff hiding in the back and Amy, standing in the center of the dining room like a sacrifice on an altar. The city lights sparkled beyond the windows, indifferent to the drama unfolding 70 stories above the streets. Ji-sung arrived at exactly 8 o'clock. Alone this time, without his guards, which somehow made him more terrifying rather than less. He moved through the empty restaurant with the confidence of a man who'd never feared anything in his life, his footsteps echoing in the silence. He'd changed suits. Tonight's was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored to his lean frame, with a black shirt underneath and no tie. The tattoo on his neck seemed darker against his skin, more prominent. He looked like he'd stepped out of a film noir, beautiful and deadly and completely aware of both. Amy stood by his usual table, hands clasped in front of her to hide their shaking. She'd pulled her hair back again, but a few curls had escaped to frame her face. She'd tried to tame them and failed. Ji-sung stopped 3 feet from her. Close enough to be intimate, far enough to maintain the power dynamic. His eyes traveled over her slowly, assessing, and Amy felt stripped bare despite being fully clothed. Good, he said finally. You came. I wasn't entirely sure you would. You bought out the entire restaurant, Amy replied, her voice steadier than she expected. I didn't think I had much choice. There's always a choice, Miss Storm. He moved past her and settled into his chair with liquid grace. The question is whether you're brave enough to make it. Sit. Amy blinked. I'm sorry? Sit. He gestured to the chair across from him. You're not here to serve me tonight. Well, not in the traditional sense. You're here to answer questions. Every instinct told her this was wrong. Waitresses didn't sit with customers, especially not customers like Park Ji-sung. But she also knew that disobeying him now would be suicide. Slowly, carefully, she moved around the table and lowered herself into the chair. The leather was soft, expensive. From this angle, she could see the Seoul skyline spread out behind Ji-sung like a kingdom at his back. Could see the precise line of his jaw, the way his dark eyes reflected the candlelight between them. Wine? He asked, already pouring from a bottle that probably cost more than her monthly rent. I'm working. You're doing what I tell you. He slid the glass across the table. Drink. It'll calm your nerves. You're shaking so hard I can hear your teeth chattering. Amy wrapped her hands around the glass but didn't drink. What do you want from me? Direct. A smile ghosted across his lips, there and gone so quickly she almost missed it. I like that. Most people spend 10 minutes dancing around what they really want to say. You just ask. I'm not most people. No. His gaze intensified. You're not. Which brings us to my questions. First one. Why didn't you bow last night? Amy had known this was coming. She'd rehearsed answers, discarded them, rehearsed more. None of them felt right. In the end, she settled for the truth, or at least part of it. I'm American, she said carefully. We don't really bow. It's not in our culture. Bullshit. The word was conversational, almost pleasant. You've worked here for what, 6 months? You've seen me before. You know the protocol. Every other American employee manages to figure it out. Try again. Amy's fingers tightened on the wine glass. I don't know what you want me to say. The truth would be refreshing. The truth? She met his eyes, and for a moment, she let him see the fear beneath her composure. The truth is I was terrified. I am terrified, but I couldn't make myself bow. I just couldn't. Something in me wouldn't let me. Ji-sung leaned back in his chair, studying her. The silence stretched between them, taut as a wire. Finally, he said, "You're not lying." "Interesting. Is that all?" Amy asked. "Can I go now?" "We're just getting started, Miss Storm." He sipped his wine, his movements elegant and deliberate. "Tell me about yourself. Where are you from? What brings a shy American waitress to Seoul? Does it matter?" "Everything matters. I don't like mysteries in my city. And you, Miss Storm, are a mystery." So she told him. Not everything, never everything, but enough. Chicago. A father she didn't speak to anymore. A desire to escape, to be somewhere new, somewhere no one knew her name or her history. She edited out the military bases, the tactical training her father had insisted on, the reason she'd run halfway around the world. She made herself small and simple and unremarkable. Ji-sung listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he asked, "And the boyfriend? The family back home waiting for you?" "No one's waiting for me." "Perfect." The word made her stomach clench. Perfect for what? Instead of answering, Ji-sung lifted his hand in a subtle gesture. A door opened at the back of the restaurant, and a waiter emerged. Not anyone Amy recognized, carrying plates of food that smelled incredible. He set them down without making eye contact with either of them, then disappeared as quickly as he'd come. "Eat," Ji-sung commanded. "You look like you've been living on convenience store meals." "I have been. I know. I had you investigated." Amy's fork froze halfway to her mouth. "You what?" "I know your address. I know you work 2 jobs. This one and teaching English to elementary students on weekends. I know you send money back to someone in the States every month, though my people couldn't figure out who. I know you don't have friends, don't date, don't do anything except work and sleep." He cut into his steak with precise movements. "I know everything about you, Amy Storm. Except the one thing that matters. Which is, why you really didn't bow." The food turned to ash in Amy's mouth. She set down her fork carefully. "I told you. You told me a partial truth. I've been lied to by professionals, Miss Storm. You're not one of them, but you're holding something back." He leaned forward, and the candlelight cast shadows across his face that made him look almost demonic. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to finish this meal. You're going to answer my questions. And at the end of the night, you're going to walk out of here and go home, and you're going to think very carefully about whether you want to keep lying to me. And if I do, keep lying, then we'll have this conversation again. And again, and again, until I'm satisfied." His smile was razor sharp. "I'm very patient, Miss Storm. And I always get what I want." The walk home that night felt different. Amy had left the skyline 2 hours later, her mind spinning from the interrogation disguised as dinner. Ji-sung had been relentless, not aggressive, not cruel, but thorough. He'd asked about her childhood, her education, her dreams. He'd asked why she was in Seoul, why she stayed, why she worked herself to exhaustion. And through it all, she'd felt the weight of his attention like a physical thing. Like being studied under a microscope by something that was trying to decide whether to dissect you or preserve you. The streets were quieter at this hour, the neon signs reflecting off wet pavement from an earlier rain. Amy pulled her jacket tighter and walked faster. The subway station was only 3 blocks away. 3 blocks through one of the safer neighborhoods in Seoul. She'd walked this route 100 times. So why did the space between her shoulder blades itch like she was being watched? She told herself she was being paranoid. That the evening with Ji-sung had put her on edge. That the shadows weren't actually moving, and the footsteps behind her were just echoes of her own. But when she turned onto the narrow street that led to the subway entrance, she knew she wasn't alone. There were 3 of them. Men in dark clothing that blended with the shadows, their faces obscured by baseball caps pulled low. They didn't run. They didn't need to. They just walked toward her with the casual confidence of predators who knew their prey was trapped. Amy's training kicked in before her conscious mind could catch up. She assessed her surroundings in a split second. Narrow street, no witnesses, delivery trucks parked on one side creating a blind spot. The subway entrance was 50 yards ahead, but they were closer. Running would just make her a moving target. Her father's voice echoed in her head. When you can't run, you make yourself too expensive to kill. Lost? The lead man's Korean was accented, harsh. Japanese, maybe, or Chinese. Pretty girl like you shouldn't walk alone. Amy backed up a step, putting one of the parked trucks at her back so they couldn't surround her. Her hand slipped into her purse, fingers closing around her keys, the only weapon she had. She threaded them between her fingers the way her father had taught her. I don't want trouble, she said in Korean, keeping her voice steady. I just want to go home. Too late. The man smiled, and it was the smile of something that enjoyed causing pain. You made trouble the moment you caught his attention. Ji-sung's little pet, our boss sends his regards. They moved as one, practiced and coordinated. Military training, Amy's brain supplied distantly. Or at least professional. The lead man went for her arms while the other two flanked her sides. She got one solid hit in, keys raking across the lead man's face, drawing blood, before they had her. Pain exploded in her side as someone's fist connected with her ribs. She gasped, tasting copper, and tried to break free. But there were too many of them, and they were too strong, and her training was years old and never meant for real combat. The lead man grabbed her hair, yanking her head back hard enough to make stars explode across her vision. Should have bowed when you had the chance, he hissed in her ear. Now you're a message. Then several things happened at once. A sound like thunder. No, not thunder, an engine. A black Mercedes screeching around the corner, headlights blinding. The men holding Amy froze for one crucial second, and that second was all Ji-sung needed. He was out of the car before it fully stopped, moving with a speed and precision that was almost beautiful. Amy had seen violence before, bar fights, domestic calls on military bases, training exercises, but she'd never seen anything like this. Ji-sung was a weapon. Pure and simple, he moved like something trained for exactly this kind of combat, every movement economical and devastating. The first man went down with a crushed windpipe, not even a scream, just a wet gurgling sound. The second tried to pull a knife and lost 3 fingers for his trouble, Ji-sung breaking them backward with casual brutality. The lead man, the one who'd been holding Amy, tried to use her as a shield. Big mistake. Ji-sung's expression didn't change, didn't even flicker, as he grabbed the man's wrist and twisted. The sound of bones breaking was loud in the narrow street. The man screamed and released Amy, stumbling backward. Ji-sung caught her before she fell, one arm wrapping around her waist to steady her. With the other hand, he pulled a gun from inside his jacket, a sleek, matte black thing that looked like it cost more than a car, and aimed it at the lead man's head. Who sent you? His voice was conversational, almost bored. The man was crying, cradling his broken wrist. Fuck you. Ji-sung shot him in the knee. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space, echoing off the buildings. The man collapsed, screaming, and Ji-sung stepped over him like he was trash on the sidewalk. I'll ask once more, who sent you? Dragon Head. The man sobbed. Dragon Head clan. They said to send a message. That you're getting weak, that the foreign girl makes you soft. Weak. Ji-sung repeated the word like he was tasting something foul. Then he looked down at the man with something that might have been pity if it had come from anyone else. Tell your boss that his message was received. And tell him that if anyone touches her again, I'll burn his entire operation to the ground and salt the fucking earth afterward. He shot the man in the other knee. Then, almost gently, he turned to Amy. Can you walk? She nodded, not trusting her voice. She was shaking again, worse than before, and she couldn't seem to stop. Ji-sung's arm was still around her waist, solid and steady, and she hated how much she wanted to lean into it. Good. Come. He guided her toward the Mercedes, opened the passenger door, and helped her inside with surprising care. The interior smelled like leather and that same dark cologne she remembered. As they pulled away from the scene, leaving 3 men bleeding in the street. Amy finally found her voice. You killed him. The first one. He's dead. Yes. You didn't even hesitate. Ji-sung glanced at her, his expression unreadable in the dashboard lights. They were going to kill you, Miss Storm. Or worse. Did you want me to ask them nicely to stop? No, she pressed her hand to her side where she'd been hit, wincing. I just didn't expect you to come. I was having you followed. He said it casually, like it was the most normal thing in the world. After last night, I knew there might be complications. I was right, you were having me followed. Amy repeated slowly. Since when? Since you refused to bow. He turned the car onto a larger street, heading away from her neighborhood. You became interesting, Miss Storm. And interesting things in my world tend to attract danger. So this is my fault? No. His voice went cold. This is the Dragon Head clan's fault. And they'll pay for it. But you. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. You're in it now, whether you want to be or not. Amy leaned her head back against the seat, closing her eyes. She could still hear the sound of bones breaking, of that man screaming. Could still feel Ji-sung's arm around her waist, protecting her with the same body that had just dealt death with casual efficiency. Where are we going? She asked finally. Somewhere safe. I'll have a doctor look at your ribs. Then we'll talk. About what? Ji-sung's hands tightened on the steering wheel. About the debt you now owe me, Miss Storm. I saved your life tonight. In my world, that means something. The somewhere safe turned out to be a penthouse apartment in Gangnam that probably cost more than Amy would make in 10 lifetimes. All glass and steel and modern minimalism, with a view of Seoul that made the Skyline restaurant look like a cheap knockoff. The doctor, an older woman who asked no questions and said even less, confirmed that Amy had bruised ribs but nothing broken. She left pills and strict instructions to rest, then disappeared as silently as she'd arrived. Amy sat on a cream-colored couch that probably cost more than a car, holding an ice pack to her side, while Ji-sung poured drinks at a bar that looked like it belonged in a high-end hotel. He'd taken off his suit jacket and rolled up his sleeves, revealing forearms corded with lean muscle and marked with more tattoos. Here, he handed her a glass of something amber. Whiskey. It'll help with the pain. I have the pills. Humor me. She took the glass. The whiskey burned going down, but it did help, or at least, it helped her stop shaking. Ji-sung settled into the chair across from her, his own glass cradled in one hand, and studied her with that same unsettling intensity. You handled yourself well, he said finally. Most people would have frozen. You fought back. Lot of good it did me. You're alive. That counts for something. He sipped his drink. Where did you learn to fight like that? The key technique was clever. Amy's hands tightened on her glass. Self-defense classes. Every girl should take them. Bullshit. The word again. Conversational and absolute. That was military training. CQC basics. You threaded those keys like someone taught you how to make a weapon out of anything. He leaned forward. Who trained you, Amy? She wanted to lie, wanted to deflect, but she was tired, and in pain, and she'd already danced around the truth too many times tonight. My father. He was military, special forces. He made sure I could defend myself. And where is this father now? I don't know. We don't talk. She met his eyes. Is this another interrogation? Because I thought you said I could rest. This is me understanding what I'm dealing with. Ji-sung set down his glass. You're not just a waitress, Amy Storm. You're trained. You're observant. You saw those men coming before they got close enough to be a real threat. That takes skill. It also didn't save me. No, I did. He stood, moving to the window to look out at the city. Which brings us to the debt. Amy's stomach clenched. What do you want? 3 nights from now, I have a business meeting. High stakes, delicate negotiations. I need someone there I can trust. He turned back to face her. I need you there. As what? A waitress? As a cupbearer. An old tradition. You'll serve drinks, observe, and report back to me what you see. Body language. Who's nervous? Who's lying? His expression was serious. I saved your life tonight. This is how you repay that debt. And if I refuse, then you walk out of here. Go home to your apartment. And hope the Dragon Head clan doesn't send more men. Bigger men. Angrier men. He tilted his head. Or you accept that you're under my protection now, and you pay the price for that protection. Amy wanted to argue. Wanted to tell him he couldn't just buy people. Couldn't just claim them like possessions. But she also knew he was right. She'd seen what his enemies were willing to do. She'd felt their hands on her, heard their promises. 3 nights, she said quietly. And then we're even? 3 nights. Then we'll see. That's not an answer. Ji-sung smiled, and for the first time, it reached his eyes. No, Miss Storm, it's not. The business meeting was held in a private room at one of Gangnam's most exclusive clubs. The kind of place that didn't have a name, just a location that everyone who mattered knew. Amy arrived in a different uniform this time, something Ji-sung had provided. A traditional Korean hanbok in deep blue silk, modified to be more formal, more decorative. She felt like a doll, dressed up and put on display. Ji-sung met her at the entrance, and she barely recognized him. Gone was the modern suit. Tonight he wore traditional Korean formal wear, a black hanbok with silver threading that caught the light. With his hair slicked back and the tattoo on full display, he looked like something out of a historical drama. A warrior prince, a king from a bloodier age. You look appropriate, he said, his eyes traveling over her. Good. Remember what I told you. Serve drinks. Watch everyone, especially the man in the gray suit, Park Kwon-soo, my second in command. He's been acting strange lately. And you want me to spy on your own man? I want you to observe. There's a difference. He placed a hand on the small of her back, guiding her inside. And Amy? Whatever happens in there, whatever they say to you or about you, you endure it with grace. Can you do that? She wanted to ask what he meant. Wanted to demand more information. But there was no time. The doors were opening, and beyond them, she could see a room full of men in expensive clothes, drinking expensive liquor, conducting business that would never see the light of day. Ji-sung's hand pressed against her back once, a warning or a reassurance or both, and then they were inside. The meeting was exactly what Amy had imagined and worse. 12 men sitting around a low table, some in modern suits, others in traditional dress. They looked up when Ji-sung entered, and she saw the exact moment they noticed her. Saw the way their expressions changed from respect to confusion to contempt. You brought a foreigner? One of the older men, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, spoke in Korean that was deliberately too fast for most foreigners to follow. And a woman? What is this, Ji-sung? Entertainment? This is my cupbearer, Ji-sung replied smoothly, settling onto his cushion at the head of the table. She serves me exclusively. You have a problem with that, Councilman Lee? I have a problem with you disrespecting tradition, Lee shot back. Cupbearers are chosen from within, not plucked from some restaurant. Amy stood frozen in the doorway, her hands clenched in the silk of her hanbok. She could feel their eyes on her, judging, dismissing. Could hear the whispers that didn't bother to be quiet. She's pretty, at least. Is Ji-sung going soft? First the incident at the restaurant, now this. I heard Dragon Head already made a move on her. Ji-sung's voice cut through the noise like a gunshot. Gentlemen, we're here to discuss the shipment routes, not my personal choices. Amy, pour the first round. She moved forward on legs that felt like water, the traditional lacquered tray heavy in her hands. She'd practiced this. Ji-sung had made her practice, but performing it in front of these men, with their contemptuous stares, was different. She moved from person to person, pouring rice wine with steady hands, keeping her eyes down. Playing the role, but she was watching, always watching. The way Councilman Lee's hand shook slightly when he spoke about the border checkpoints. The way the man Ji-sung had identified as Park Kwon-soo checked his phone 3 times in 5 minutes. The way 2 of the younger men exchanged glances that spoke of shared secrets. The meeting dragged on for 2 hours. Amy's feet ached from standing, her ribs throbbed where she'd been hit, and her face hurt from maintaining a neutral expression while listening to these men discuss her like she was a particularly controversial piece of furniture. But she noticed things. She noticed that Park Kwon-soo never once looked at Ji-sung during the arguments about territory. She noticed that Councilman Lee kept steering the conversation toward Ji-sung's recent instability. She noticed the way several men seemed too comfortable with each other, like they'd been meeting privately. When it finally ended, when the men began to file out in groups of 2 and 3, Amy felt Ji-sung's hand on her elbow. Gentle, but firm, guiding her out a different exit, through a back corridor that led to a private elevator. Neither of them spoke until they were in his car, the doors closed, the tinted windows providing blessed privacy. Amy slumped against the seat, exhausted and humiliated and angry all at once. "I'm sorry," Ji-sung said quietly. She turned to stare at him. "What?" "I'm sorry. They were crueler than I anticipated." He stared straight ahead, his hands on the steering wheel even though the car wasn't moving yet. "You performed well, but I underestimated how much they would resent your presence." "I was decoration," Amy said bitterly. "A trophy. Something for them to ridicule." "You were a test," Ji-sung corrected. "And you passed." "A test of what?" "Of whether I've gone soft." He turned to look at her finally, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "They think you're a weakness, Amy. A crack in my armor. They're wrong, but they don't know that yet. How am I not a weakness? I got attacked because of you. I just spent 2 hours being humiliated because of you. And you survived both," he said. "Which tells me something important." "What?" "That you're stronger than you look." He started the car. "Now tell me what you saw." "Every detail." So she did. She told him about Park Kwon-soo's nervousness, about Councilman Lee's trembling hand, about the private glances and the too comfortable body language. She watched Ji-sung's expression grow darker with each observation, saw the way his jaw clenched when she described certain interactions. "You're sure about Park?" he asked when she finished. "About the phone?" 3 times in 5 minutes, and he kept it in his lap like he was hiding the screen. "He is communicating with someone he does not want you to know about." Ji-sung nodded slowly, then to Amy's surprise he smiled. It was cold, calculating and absolutely terrifying. "Good, that tracks with my suspicions, but suspicion is not proof. Park is a council favorite. I cannot move against him without absolute certainty or I risk a civil war within the organization." "What are you going to do?" "I am going to watch him and I am going to wait for him to make a mistake. The question is, what are you going to do?" "Your debt is paid," Amy stormed. "You did what I asked. You can walk away now. Go back to your restaurant, your English classes, your safe little life." He glanced at her. "Or you can stay. Help me root out the traitors. Learn to survive in this world." "Why would I do that?" "Because you're tired of being invisible." His words were soft but certain. "You're tired of being overlooked. You stood up to me in that restaurant because something in you refused to bow anymore. That doesn't go away just because the situation changes." Amy wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was wrong. But as they drove through the neon-lit streets of Seoul, past buildings that touched the sky and people living their lives in blissful ignorance of the underworld that existed beneath their feet, she couldn't find the words. Because maybe, terrifyingly, he was right. The revelation came 3 nights later, back at the Skyline restaurant. Ji-sung had insisted Amy return to her normal shift, had insisted everything appear routine. But he'd stationed guards outside, not his usual ones, but different men, ones he trusted implicitly. Protection that wasn't obvious but was absolute. Amy was refilling water glasses when Ji-sung arrived for dinner. Alone again, like that first night, though now the staff knew better than to gossip. Manager Kim had given her a wide berth ever since she'd returned, his nervous energy transmitting clearly. "Don't make trouble, don't attract attention, just survive." She approached Ji-sung's table with the menu, playing her role. But before she could speak, he said, "Sit. I'm working." Amy, just her name, but weighted with meaning. "Sit." She sat. Ji-sung reached across the table and turned her wrist, revealing the inside of her forearm. His touch was surprisingly gentle, clinical almost, as he traced a faint scar there, something Amy had gotten years ago during training. "You have your marks," he said quietly. "I have mine." Amy's eyes flickered to the tattoo on his neck, the geometric patterns that had fascinated and frightened her since that first night. "What does it mean? You want to know?" Something shifted in his expression. Not quite vulnerability, but close. "Most people are too afraid to ask. I'm asking." He was silent for a long moment, his fingers still resting against her wrist. The restaurant hummed with quiet conversation around them, but their table felt like an island, separate from everything else. "It's a succession mark," he said finally. "In the Viper Syndicate, when you take control, you take the tattoo. Each pattern represents a territory, a burden, a responsibility. This one," he touched the spot just below his jaw, "is Gangnam. This section is the Port Authority. This curve is the political connections." His voice went flat. "I was 19 when they marked me. My father had just been killed. I didn't want it. I wanted to run, to be anywhere else. But you don't refuse this kind of inheritance." Amy found herself leaning forward, drawn in despite herself. "So it's not pride. It's a prison." "It's both." He met her eyes. "I've built an empire with this burden. I've survived challenges that should have killed me 100 times over. But I've never been free. Not for a single day since they burned this into my skin." The honesty in his voice made something in Amy's chest tighten. She'd built an image of Ji-sung as untouchable, inhuman almost. But in this moment, she could see the 19-year-old boy forced to become a king before he was ready. "Can I?" She hesitated, then pushed forward. "Can I see it? Up close?" Ji-sung went very still. For a moment, Amy thought she'd overstepped, that he'd shut down or worse. But then, slowly, he leaned forward and tilted his head to the side, exposing the full expanse of his neck. Amy reached out with trembling fingers. The tattoo was intricate, far more detailed than she'd realized. The ink was slightly raised against his skin, marking where the needles had gone deep. She traced the geometric patterns gently, feeling his pulse jump beneath her touch. "It must have hurt," she whispered. "It did, but pain is part of the ritual. You're supposed to endure it without sound, without flinching. To prove you're worthy." His voice was barely audible. "I was terrified. I wanted to scream, but I didn't make a sound." Amy's fingers paused over a particular section, a spiral pattern that seemed darker than the rest. "And this? That's for the people I've lost. Every death that happened on my watch. Every betrayal, every failure." He closed his eyes. "It grows heavier every year." Without thinking, Amy pressed her palm flat against his neck, covering the tattoo with her hand. Covering the burden. She felt his pulse racing, felt the heat of his skin, felt the way his breath caught. "You don't have to carry it alone," she said softly. "That's what you told me. That you needed a partner, not a subordinate. Maybe that goes both ways." Ji-sung's hand came up to cover hers, holding it in place against his neck. When he opened his eyes, they were dark and intense and full of something Amy couldn't name. "You're dangerous, Amy Storm," he murmured. "More dangerous than any assassin. Because you make me want things I gave up on years ago." "Like what?" "Like trust, like partnership, like something that isn't built on fear." His thumb stroked across her knuckles. "You scare me more than the Dragonhead clan ever could." The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. Amy's heart was hammering so hard she was sure he could feel it through her palm. She should pull away, should retreat to safety, should. Her phone buzzed in her apron pocket, shattering the moment. Ji-sung released her hand, and Amy fumbled for the device, grateful for the interruption and devastated by it in equal measure. The message was from Min-ji. "Manager Kim needs you in the back. Emergency." Amy showed Ji-sung the screen. His expression hardened immediately, all traces of vulnerability gone. "Go, I'll wait here." But when Amy reached the back corridor, she found not Manager Kim but two men in dark suits she didn't recognize. They moved fast, blocking her path, and one of them pressed something cold and metallic against her side. "Don't scream," he said in Korean. "Don't run. Just walk." They took her to a warehouse in Yongsan, one of those anonymous industrial buildings that dotted the area. The kind of place where screams wouldn't carry and bodies could disappear. Amy's training kept her calm on the surface, but inside, she was calculating. Two guards, One door. No windows in the room they'd locked her in. Bad odds. She'd been there for maybe 20 minutes when the door opened again, and an older man entered. Distinguished, silver-haired, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Amy's entire wardrobe. She recognized him immediately from the business meeting. Councilman Lee. Miss Storm, he said pleasantly, as if they'd met at a garden party. I apologize for the dramatic extraction. But we needed to talk, and Ji-sung has become possessive of your time. Amy forced herself to stay seated on the cold metal chair. Forced herself to appear calmer than she felt. If you wanted to talk, you could have called. I don't think you would have come. And I don't think Ji-sung would have let you. Lee settled into a chair across from her, moving like a man with all the time in the world. Let me be direct. You're a complication, Miss Storm. A foreign influence on a man who's already showing signs of instability. The Council of Elders has decided that for the good of the organization, you need to be removed. Removed. Amy kept her voice steady. You mean killed. I mean removed from the equation. What happens after that is up to you. He leaned forward. Here's my offer. You leave Seoul. Tonight, we provide transportation, money, a new identity if you need it. You disappear, and Ji-sung never finds you. In return, you get to live. And if I refuse, then we remove you permanently. And Ji-sung, in his grief and rage, makes mistakes. Costly mistakes. The kind that get him killed by his many enemies. Either way, you're gone. The question is whether you take him down with you. Amy's mind raced. This was a test, had to be. But Lee's expression was sincere, almost sympathetic. He genuinely believed he was offering her a way out. You're wrong about him, she said finally. Ji-sung isn't unstable. He's adapting. And you're afraid of that. We're afraid of what he's becoming, Lee corrected. A man who puts personal attachments above organizational needs. A man who challenges tradition. A man who, he paused, choosing his words carefully. Quote, who might decide he doesn't need the council anymore. That's dangerous for everyone. Before Amy could respond, her phone buzzed. Lee gestured for her to check it. The message was from Ji-sung. Where are you? He's looking for you, Lee said. What will you tell him? Amy's thumbs moved across the screen. Safe. Stepped out for air. Back soon. She hit send and looked up at Lee. I'll think about your offer. Give me 24 hours. You have 12. Lee stood. After that, the decision gets made for you. And Miss Storm? If you tell Ji-sung about this conversation, you'll force our hand. The best way to protect him is to leave quietly. They released her 3 blocks from the restaurant. Amy walked back slowly, her mind spinning with implications and strategies. Lee was right about one thing. Her presence was causing problems for Ji-sung. But running felt like surrender, like bowing to a different kind of pressure. By the time she reached the skyline, she'd made her decision. She found Ji-sung in the private dining room, his expression dark with barely controlled rage. Where were you? He demanded. I had my men searching. We need to talk, Amy interrupted. But not here, your penthouse. Now. Something in her tone must have convinced him, because he didn't argue. They left through the back entrance, took his car, drove in tense silence through the late-night streets. Amy kept checking the mirrors, watching for tails, using every skill her father had taught her. Once inside the penthouse, with the door locked and the security system armed, she told him everything. The extraction, Lee's offer, the 12-hour deadline. She watched his expression go from shock to fury to something cold and calculating. They took you, he said quietly. They put their hands on you. They threatened you. They offered me a way out, Amy corrected. They think I'm making you weak. They think if I disappear, you'll go back to being the Ice King they can control. And what do you think? I think they're terrified. I think you've changed, and they don't know how to handle it. I think, she paused, meeting his eyes. I think if I leave, they win. But if I stay, this gets worse before it gets better. Ji-sung moved to the window, staring out at the city with his hands clenched behind his back. The tattoo on his neck seemed darker in the ambient light, more pronounced. When he spoke, his voice was ice. You're not leaving. Not because they demand it. Not because it's easier. Not because you're afraid. He turned to face her. You're staying because I'm going to dismantle the Council of Elders piece by piece, and I'm going to need you to help me do it. Ji-sung. They crossed a line tonight, Amy. They put their hands on something that's mine to protect. That's a declaration of war, whether they realize it or not. His smile was sharp enough to cut. Pack a bag. You're moving in here. Full-time protection. No arguments. They want to remove you from the equation? Let them try. The next 72 hours were a masterclass in controlled chaos. Ji-sung moved Amy into his penthouse and assigned a full security detail. 6 men who rotated in 8-hour shifts, all of them loyal to Ji-sung personally rather than to the organization. He also began systematically investigating the council members, looking for weaknesses, for leverage, for anything he could use. Amy found herself in a strange liminal space. Not quite a prisoner, not quite a partner. She had access to most of the penthouse, could order food, could work remotely on her English teaching materials. But she couldn't leave without approval, couldn't contact anyone outside Ji-sung's inner circle. It was during one of these long afternoons, while Ji-sung was in a meeting and Amy was pacing the living room like a caged animal, that she noticed something odd. Park Kwon-soo, Ji-sung's second-in-command, was in the building. She'd seen him arrive on the security monitors. But instead of going to Ji-sung's office on the top floor, he'd gone to the parking garage. Amy's instincts screamed warning. She pulled up the security feed on the tablet Ji-sung had given her. He'd shown her how to access it, told her to watch for threats, and cycled through the garage cameras. There, Park Kwon-soo, standing by a black SUV, talking to someone. The angle was wrong to see the other person's face, but their body language was furtive, secretive. Park handed over an envelope. The other person handed back what looked like a burner phone. Amy's heart pounded. She took screenshots, recorded the video clip, and was still staring at the evidence when Ji-sung returned an hour later. You were right about Park, she said immediately, not bothering with pleasantries. Look, she showed him the footage. Watched his expression go from curious to cold to absolutely murderous. He played the clip 3 times, zooming in, analyzing every frame. Do you recognize the other person? He asked, his voice dangerously soft. No, but the way Park is acting, that's definitely a dead drop. Information exchange. Amy pulled up another screenshot. And look at the timestamp. This is the 3rd time he's done this in the past week. Always same time, same location. Ji-sung was silent for a long moment. Then he picked up his phone and made a call. Bring me Park Kwon-soo. Now. No, I don't care if he's in a meeting. Interrupt it, and come armed. He ended the call and looked at Amy. His eyes were chips of black ice. You just saved my life. Again, I don't understand. Park knows my schedule, he knows my security protocols, he knows where I sleep, what I eat, who I trust, but until this video I could not touch him, now I can. Ji-sung's jaw clenched. If he is selling that information, then everyone around me is in danger, including you. 20 minutes later, Park arrived. He walked into the penthouse with the confidence of someone who'd been here 1,000 times, who belonged in this space. His expression shifted when he saw Amy. A flicker of something, surprise? Anger, before he smoothed it away. You wanted to see me, boss? Park said in Korean. I did. Ji-sung gestured to the tablet on the coffee table. I want you to explain what you're doing in that video. Amy watched Park's face as he looked at the screen. Watched the blood drain from his features. Watched his eyes go wide with panic before training kicked in and he tried to salvage the situation. That's not what it looks like, Park started. I was meeting with Dragon Head representatives, Ji-sung finished. Trading information for money. Betraying me. Betraying everyone who trusted you. He stood, and despite being slightly shorter than Park, he somehow seemed larger. How long? Ji-sung, please, you have to understand. How long? Park's shoulders slumped. 6 months. They approached me after the territory dispute. They offered money, protection for my family. I didn't want to, but they threatened. So instead of coming to me, your brother, your friend, the man who promoted you above 20 others, you sold me out. Ji-sung's voice was soft, almost gentle, which made it infinitely more terrifying. You gave them my movements. My plans. You told them about Amy. I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice. Ji-sung pulled a gun from inside his jacket, that same matte black weapon Amy had seen him use in the alley. You made yours. Now live with it. Wait. Amy surprised herself by speaking. Both men turned to look at her. Don't kill him here. You'll have questions. Information you need. It was a delaying tactic, weak and transparent, but Ji-sung seemed to consider it. Finally, he lowered the gun slightly and nodded to his guards. Take him to the warehouse. Get everything he knows. Then, dispose of him. As they dragged Park away, the man begging, pleading, swearing his loyalty, Amy felt sick. She'd just condemned a man to death. Maybe he deserved it. Maybe this was justice in Ji-sung's world. But that didn't make it easier to stomach. You shouldn't have interfered, Ji-sung said once they were alone. I know. He betrayed me. Betrayed all of us. He deserves what's coming. I know that too. Amy wrapped her arms around herself. I've never been responsible for someone's death before. Ji-sung's expression softened fractionally. He crossed to her, and for a moment, she thought he might embrace her. Instead, he just stood close, his presence solid and grounding. You didn't kill him, Amy. I did. You just gave me the information I needed to protect myself. To protect you. His hand came up to cup her cheek. Don't carry his death. He made his choices long before you found that video. But Amy couldn't shake the feeling that she'd crossed a line. That in helping Ji-sung, in staying in this world, she was becoming something she'd never intended to be. The look in Park's eyes as they dragged him away would haunt her. And the worst part? She wasn't sure she regretted it. The argument started 2 days later. Ji-sung had been increasingly paranoid since Park's betrayal, questioning everyone, suspecting shadows. When Amy tried to suggest he reach out to some of his more moderate allies, he'd snapped at her. When she pushed back, things escalated. You don't understand how this world works, Ji-sung said, his voice sharp with frustration. Trust is a luxury I can't afford right now. Everyone is suspect until proven otherwise. Including me? Amy shot back. I'm the one who found the evidence. I'm the one who warned you. But you're treating me like I'm under house arrest. I'm keeping you safe. You're keeping me isolated. She was pacing now, her frustration boiling over. I've been locked in this penthouse for almost a week. I can't work, can't see anyone, can't even walk outside without 6 armed guards. That's not protection, Ji-sung. That's imprisonment. Would you prefer I let you walk into another ambush? Let the Dragon Head clan finish what they started? His eyes flashed. You think I'm being unreasonable? Park was my brother in everything but blood, and he sold me out. How am I supposed to trust anyone after that? By having faith that not everyone is a traitor. Amy stopped pacing, facing him directly. You told me you needed a partner. But partners trust each other. Partners don't lock each other away and make unilateral decisions. Partners also don't question my judgment when it comes to security. Your judgment? Amy laughed bitterly. You mean your paranoia? You're so busy looking for enemies that you can't see the people still trying to help you. The words hung in the air between them, sharp and cutting. Ji-sung's expression went cold, closed off. When he spoke, his voice was flat. Maybe you're right. Maybe I am paranoid. But paranoia keeps you alive in this world. And if you can't handle that, if you can't understand why I need to be careful, then maybe, he paused, and something flickered across his face. Maybe you should take Lee's offer. Leave, be safe. Amy felt like he'd slapped her. You're sending me away? I'm giving you an out. You said it yourself. This is imprisonment. You're not happy here. You're scared of what I've become, what you might become. He turned away from her. I'll arrange transportation. By tomorrow, you can be on a plane to anywhere you want. Start over. Forget any of this happened. That's not what I meant. It's what you need. His voice was final. I can't protect you if I'm constantly worried about whether you're going to betray me. And you can't live like this, always looking over your shoulder. It's better this way. Amy wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was wrong, that running wasn't the answer. But the set of his shoulders, the tone of his voice, he'd made his decision. And maybe, a small part of her whispered, maybe he was right. Maybe she wasn't cut out for this world. Fine, she said quietly. I'll pack my things. She left him standing by the window, staring out at the city he ruled, alone again. Just like he'd always been. Amy left the penthouse that night with a single bag and an escort of 2 guards who drove her to a hotel near the airport. They weren't friendly, weren't conversational. Just professional. She had a ticket for a flight to Los Angeles leaving at noon the next day. A new identity. Cash. Everything she needed to disappear. She should have felt relieved. Should have felt free. Instead, she felt hollow. She was sitting on the hotel bed staring at the plane ticket when her phone buzzed. Not her regular phone. That had been returned to her. But the secure phone Ji-sung had given her weeks ago. The one she had forgotten was still in her bag. The ID read Unit 6. That was the head of her security detail, the man who had just driven her here. The message was brief. I am violating orders sending this, but you need to know Ji-sung is going to the Red Moon Gala tomorrow night alone. Park gave up the trap details before he died. Ji-sung knows it is an ambush. He is going anyway to close the loop so they stop hunting you. He is trading his life for your safety. Amy's hands shook as she read the message again, then again. She dialed the number immediately. Why? She demanded when the guard picked up. Why would he do that? Because he is tired. The guard's voice was low, rough, because Park's betrayal broke something in him and because he believes if he dies taking them out you disappear and stay safe. He paused. He is going there to die, Miss Storm, and he is doing it to protect you. Amy ended the call, stared at the plane ticket, thought about Los Angeles, about starting over, about living the rest of her life knowing she'd run when Ji-sung needed her most. Then she tore up the ticket and started repacking her bag. The Red Moon Gala was held at the Sheila Hotel in a private ballroom that cost more to rent for one night than most people made in a year. Amy had snuck in as part of the catering staff. It wasn't hard when you'd worked in high-end service and knew how to blend in. White shirt, black vest, apron tied just right. She looked like every other server moving through the crowd with trays of champagne and appetizers. The ballroom was spectacular. Crystal chandeliers that probably weighed more than cars. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Tables decorated with flowers that had been flown in from Europe. And everywhere, men in expensive suits conducting business that would never see the light of day. The 5 crime families were all represented. Amy recognized some faces from Ji-sung's meeting. Councilman Lee, looking distinguished and deadly. Others were new but had the same energy. The same predatory awareness. And there, entering the ballroom like he owned it, was Ji-sung. He wore a black suit so perfectly tailored it might have been sewn onto his body. His hair was styled back, the tattoo on full display. He looked every inch the Viper King, powerful, dangerous, untouchable. But Amy could see what others couldn't. The slight tension in his shoulders. The way his eyes constantly scanned the room, not with confidence but with resignation. He was waiting for the attack. Expecting it, ready for it. Amy kept her head down, circulating with her tray, getting closer. She needed to warn him, needed to tell him she was here, needed to. The lights went out, gunshots erupted in the darkness, muzzle flashes like lightning. Screams, breaking glass, the coordinated chaos of a planned assault. Amy dropped her tray and moved on instinct, using the skills her father had drilled into her years ago. Low and fast, using the tables for cover, tracking the shooters by their muzzle flashes. She found Ji-sung by the main table. He was bleeding from his shoulder, his gun in hand, returning fire with mechanical precision. But he was pinned down, flanked on 2 sides, and Amy could see more attackers moving in. She picked up a champagne bottle from a fallen tray, the only weapon available, and brought it down on the nearest attacker's head. The man dropped, his gun clattered across the floor, and Amy snatched it up without thinking. Amy? Ji-sung's voice was hoarse with shock. What the fuck are you doing here? Saving your stubborn ass, she shot back. Can you see? Shoulder wound. I'm fine, but there's at least 8 of them, and they've blocked the main exits. Then we go through them. Amy checked the gun. Glock 19. The magazine felt light, roughly a third full. She clicked the safety off. Her hands knew what to do even if her brain was screaming that this was insane. Kitchen exit. 40 meters northwest. I saw it when I came in. You came in through the kitchen? Staff entrance. I can get us out the same way. She pulled him up, letting him lean on her. He was heavier than he looked, all lean muscle and determination. But we need to move now. They moved together through the chaos. Amy fired twice, center mass, just like her father taught her, just like she'd practiced on ranges she wasn't supposed to remember. Both shots hit. Both attackers went down. Ji-sung took out 3 more with ruthless efficiency, his injured shoulder barely slowing him. The kitchen was a maze of stainless steel and steam. Amy navigated by memory and instinct. Ji-sung at her back, both of them moving like they'd trained together for years. They burst through the loading dock door into the night air, and for one beautiful moment, Amy thought they'd made it. Then 4 more attackers appeared, cutting off their escape. Well, Ji-sung said, breathing hard, his gun trained on the nearest threat. This is unfortunate. I have 4 bullets left, Amy said, mentally counting the rounds in the scavenged magazine. I have 6, he glanced at her. You any good with that thing? My father was a tactical trainer. I grew up on shooting ranges. She steadied her grip. I am good enough. Then prove it. They fought back to back, moving as one unit. Amy took the left side, Ji-sung the right. Her shots were controlled, precise, shoulder, thigh, center mass. His were brutal and efficient. They moved through the attackers like a machine built for exactly this purpose. When the last attacker fell, when the night was silent except for their harsh breathing, Amy and Ji-sung stood in the loading dock surrounded by bodies, both of them covered in blood that might or might not be their own. You came back, Ji-sung said finally. I told you to leave. Gave you an out. I don't bow to you, remember? Amy lowered her gun, hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. And I don't abandon my partner. Ji-sung turned to look at her fully. His expression was raw, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. Partner, you said you needed one. You were right. She met his eyes. And I think maybe I needed one too. He crossed to her in 2 strides and pulled her into an embrace that was desperate and relieved and full of everything they'd been dancing around for weeks. Amy wrapped her arms around him, feeling his heart hammering against her chest, feeling alive and terrified and absolutely certain. Don't ever run again, Ji-sung murmured against her hair. Promise me, only if you promise to stop trying to die nobly. Deal. Sirens were approaching in the distance. They needed to move, to disappear before police arrived. But for one moment more, they just stood there, 2 survivors holding onto each other in the darkness, knowing that everything had changed. The aftermath took 3 weeks to settle. The Council of Elders, decimated by the Gala attack and implicated in Park's betrayal, fell apart. Councilman Lee was found dead in his office, officially a suicide, though everyone knew better. The Dragon Head clan's leadership vanished overnight, their operations absorbed or destroyed. Ji-sung emerged as the undisputed power in Seoul's underworld, not because he was the cruelest or the strongest, but because he'd survived everything they'd thrown at him. And because he'd proven that loyalty mattered more than fear. Amy returned to work at the Skyline restaurant. Not because she needed the money. Ji-sung had made sure she'd never need money again, but because she wanted to. Because going back to normal, even partially, felt important. A reminder that she could still exist in the daylight world, even while living in the shadows. It was a Tuesday evening, 3 weeks after the gala, when Ji-sung walked into the Skyline. The reaction was immediate. Conversations died, heads dropped, the synchronized wave of submission that Amy remembered from that first night. But this time, there was something different in the air. Not just fear, but respect. Acknowledgement that Ji-sung had changed the rules of the game. He walked through the dining room slowly, deliberately. Amy stood by the window table, his usual spot, and watched him approach. She wore her uniform, her hair pulled back, looking every inch the waitress she'd been when this all started. But she wasn't that person anymore. And he wasn't the same cold king who'd demanded her submission. Ji-sung reached the table. The entire restaurant held its breath, waiting to see what would happen. Waiting for Amy to bow, for the natural order to reassert itself. Amy stood tall, met his eyes, refused to lower her head. And then Ji-sung did something no one expected. He stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she could see the faint scar on his shoulder from the gala, could smell his cologne, could see the warmth in his eyes that had never been there before. And he bowed, not a deep bow, not the kind of submission others offered him, but a slight inclination of his head, an acknowledgement, a sign of respect between equals. The restaurant gasped. Someone dropped a glass. Manager Kim looked like he might faint. Ji-sung straightened and held out his hand. "Table for two, Miss Storm?" Amy took his hand, letting him guide her into the seat across from him. Not as his servant, not as his subordinate, but as his partner. As his equal. Around them, the skyline slowly came back to life. Conversations resumed. Servers moved with renewed purpose. But everyone understood what had just happened. Everyone had witnessed the moment the Viper King bowed to someone who refused to bow to him. "You're going to start rumors," Amy said softly, studying Ji-sung across the candlelit table. "Let them talk." He poured wine into both their glasses. "I'm done living by their rules. We make our own now. Our own rules." Amy tasted the words, tasted the wine. Both were intoxicating. "I like the sound of that." "Good." Ji-sung's smile was genuine, reaching his eyes in a way that transformed his entire face. "Because I have a feeling we're going to rewrite quite a few of them." Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Seoul sparkled in the darkness. Millions of lives, millions of stories, millions of moments just like this one. And for the first time since that night she'd refused to bow, Amy felt like she could breathe. Not because she was free from danger. She'd never be free from that, not in Ji-sung's world. But because she'd found something worth fighting for, worth standing tall for, worth refusing to bow for. She'd found her place, and more importantly, she'd found someone willing to meet her there, not as king and subject, not as master and servant, but as two people who'd chosen each other against every odd, every threat, every rule that said they shouldn't. "To new beginnings," Ji-sung said, raising his glass. "To refusing to bow," Amy countered, raising hers. Their glasses clinked together, crystal singing in the silence. And in that moment, surrounded by a room full of people who'd learned that the old rules no longer applied, they began writing the first chapter of a story that was entirely their own.